Acts chapter 2. If you have it, say I have it. Look down at verse 43. Acts chapter 2, verse 43. Many miracles and wonders were being done through the apostles, and everyone was filled with awe. All the believers continued together in close fellowship and shared their belongings with one another. They would sell their property and possessions and distribute the money among all, according to what each one needed. Day after day, they met as a group in the temple. They had their meals together in their homes, eating with glad and humble hearts, praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And every day the Lord added to their group those that were being saved. Now, if you'll turn to Acts chapter 4. And look down at verse 32. Acts chapter 4, verse 32. The group of believers was one in mind and heart. None of them said that any of their belongings were their own, but they all shared with one another everything they had. With great power, the apostles gave witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and God poured rich blessings on them all. There was no one in the group who was in need. Those who owned fields and houses would sell them, bring the money received from the sale, and turn it over to the apostles, and the money was distributed according to the needs of the people. This sounds to the unsaved person like communism. You know, a lot of people say, you know, this country was headed towards socialism and communism, but they're only thinking about one part. The difference between Hitler's government, the Nazi government, was that the government determined who got what, not the people. See, what we want in this country is the opportunity for everybody to make the same money. We want a level playing field. And the playing field in America is not level, has never been level. Okay? We're not asking the government to determine who gets what. Okay? That's communism. But we're saying that the people should have a right to determine their own destiny. Okay? Now, in the early church, if you look at what we just got through reading, what they did was they made sure that there was no needs in the community. For instance, if I had food and you didn't have food, then I made sure you had food. The government didn't make me do that. I chose to do that as an act of my will. Say amen, somebody. So don't let people just twist you all up and stuff like that. And, you know, they say, well, that's socialism and stuff like that. If you want to have the opportunity for everybody to have medicine, doctor's care. You know, when Obama was saying, you know, we're going to make sure everybody has an opportunity to get health care. And they said, well, that's socialism. Not when everybody pitches in to make sure that everybody has health care. That's what a community does. A community looks among itself and sees who needs help and helps the people that's in their community. And so what I want to share with you this morning in my time up here is how to cultivate community. Everybody say how to cultivate community. The church is a community. The word church comes from the Greek word ekklesia or ecclesia, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Potatoes, taters, potatoes, you know, whatever. But it's the called out ones. It's the people who are a part of a community. We're a part of a body. All around the world, people who are Christians are part of our same body. And the Bible is very clear when it says, do good to those, especially to those who are of the household of faith. In other words, if you're going to help people, at least start with the folks that's in you, in your body, in your group. Now, there was a cliche that I heard growing up that love starts at home. Have y'all heard something like that? Charity, they use the word charity, starts at home and then spreads abroad. And that's basically what we're saying. If you're going to do good to the people that's among you first, and then take care of the folks out there. Say amen. Now, I'm going to share with you several things, about 4 or 5 things this morning, that I believe that it takes to really create a community. When we started here in 1992 in July, across the street in the storefront over there, we just had a handful of people. Actually, we started with me and my wife and my 2 girls, but we had 30 people who actually showed up at the first service. That's right, isn't it? 30 people? Okay, I just had to make sure because sometimes I get my numbers wrong. And Gwen's pretty meticulous about that. Well, we had a group that showed up, and then out of that group, we had a few people that joined us, not all the 30. And then that night, we had a night service. We had some more people come that night, and some more people joined us. And we were creating a group of people, but we weren't a community yet. We were just a group of people that joined what Gwen and I were going to do. They said, we want to be a part of what you're going to do. Then it's up to me and Gwen to create, since we're the ones starting it, to create a culture of community amongst the people who came among us. I think it started out that night. I'm pretty sure I got my facts correct. That night, that's when Chip came, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And it wasn't long after that when Danny and Angela came. I can't remember exactly where it was. And it wasn't too long after that Brenda Ware came. I can't remember exactly the exact. You might be able to remember the exact. But it was, people came to be a part of the group. And then it was up to Gwen and I, to get these people together, spend time with these people, and create community. First thing that it takes, you might want to write these down, to create community, it takes honesty. Honesty means that you lovingly speak the truth in love rather than ignore an issue. If you're going to create community as a church, you have to learn, according to Ephesians 4:15, says, but speak the truth in love, and you grow up in all things, which is the head, even Christ. You speak the truth in love. Everybody say, speak the truth in love. Now, a lot of folks like to speak the truth, but to leave out the other part. I hear people say it all the time, I'm just going to give them a piece of my mind. Or I'm just saying, I'm just keeping it real, or I'm telling the truth. But see, that's just part of the equation. In love means, what is the motive behind what you're speaking to that person? If your motive is to get them told, then you need to keep that. I just tell the truth. Well, that ain't all it told you to do. It told you to speak the truth in other words, have the motive of restoration in your heart when you begin to speak correction to a person. All right? Proverbs 24:26 says, giving an honest answer is a sign of true friendship. That's the contemporary English version. Giving an honest answer is a sign of true friendship. Somebody asks you, is this, they supposed to be your friend and everything, and you're doing something that's stupid. And they ask you, don't be scared. Be a friend. Say, that's really stupid. Now, a lot of us don't want to risk doing that because we are scared of rejection. Say amen, somebody. But if you want to be a real friend, you have to take that risk. Ephesians 4:25 in the Message translation says, what this adds up to, men and women, is no more lies, no more pretense. Tell your neighbor the truth. In Christ's body, we're all connected to one another after all. When you lie to others, you end up lying to yourself. Don't be doing to your friend talking about, well, I know God knows your heart. We're only human. Don't be helping people out like that. They don't need an excuse to continue acting dumb. Say amen, somebody. Proverbs 28:23 says, in the end, people appreciate honest criticism far more than flattery. That's the New Living Translation. 1 Corinthians 5, verse 13, the Message translated and following, says, I'll tell you what I would do, even though I'm not there in person. This is Paul talking to the church in Corinth. Consider me right there with you because I can fully see what's going on. I'm telling you that this is wrong. You must not simply look the other way and hope it goes away on its own. Bring it out in the open and deal with it in the authority of Jesus, our master. Assemble the community. I'll be present in spirit with you, and our master Jesus will be present in power. Hold this man's conduct up in public scrutiny. Let him defend it if he can. But if he can't, now this is rough, but this is still the Bible, then out with him. It would be totally devastating to him, of course, and embarrassing to you. But better devastation and embarrassment than damnation. You want him on his feet and forgiven before the master on the day of judgment. In other words, you want the people to get right. As long as you patronize people or pat them on the back when they're doing wrong, they have no reason to change. It's embarrassing to correct people, and God's not in the business of publicly shaming people. He always talks to the person first. Holy Spirit always talks to you first. But if you won't listen, in fact, he may talk to you several times before he actually sends another person. I'm convinced that God is not in the business of just embarrassing people, calling, as we say, throwing people under the bus. But what he does, he gives you a chance to get it right. He'll speak to you. He'll talk to you. He'll watch that. Stay away from that. Don't do this. Go there. Don't do that. He'll give you all those directions. If you won't listen, if you're just going to be hard-headed, then what he'll do is he'll send somebody else. The prophet's ministry is not to call people's sins out in front of people. If I'm called to be a prophet, which I'm not, but if I was, and I knew somebody was messing up, my job is not to call you out in front of everybody else and say, you're doing this and doing that and doing that. That's not, you can't find that in the Bible. But my job is to speak to you. Most of the prophetic ministry in the scriptures was one-on-one. You remember Nathan went to David? Nathan didn't stand up in front of the whole nation and said, David, ABC. He went to David. He said, David, listen. And he told a little story. And David got mad telling the story. Shows you how foolish we are when we're messing up. He said, that man need to die. Before he dies, he need to pay that man back 4 times. And then Nathan looked at him and said, I'm talking about you. You have to be careful how you just... This is what you need to do with them folks. You might be them folks. Y'all with me? And so you don't want to just jump on people like that. But you go to them, and then you go, if God sends you to a person, you give them, that's another chance to get it right. If you refuse that, you be hard-headed and stiff-necked about that, then eventually the Lord will fix it where you're exposed. And even when he does that, it's for your restoration. Yes, everybody around you going to be embarrassed, but if you get right, you can still go to heaven. Say amen, somebody. I'm going to drop down here to one of these verses here. It says, The reason this letter was written, 1 Corinthians was written, because the guy was going with his mother-in-law. He was having an affair with his stepmother. Not mother-in-law, stepfather. Stepmother. Well, that was what I was thinking, but I said it the wrong way. I just said it the wrong way. Okay, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it. His father's wife. Okay. And so he was fooling around with her. And the folks in the church was acting like. And so Paul said, no, we're not going to do that. And so he wrote the whole letter. He wrote the letter to the leadership of Corinth to let them know, you better do something about this. And they did. And that's the reason 2 Corinthians was written is because of their correction to this guy, and they basically disfellowshipped him. They just said, you can't hang out with us. The guy got right. And 2 Corinthians was written to the church to say, don't keep beating the guy up. Put your arms around him. He repented because of what the correction that you gave him. See, that's cultivating community. See, you don't just cut folks off. You love on them, you pray for them, and then when they get right, you put your arms back around them. I wrote you in my earlier letter, this is 2 Corinthians, he's saying, I wrote you in my earlier letters, you shouldn't make yourselves at home among sexually promiscuous people. That's whatever, that's adultery, that's homosexuality, that's whatever. I didn't mean that you should have nothing at all to do with outsiders of that sort, or with crooks, whether blue or white collars, or with spiritual phonies for that matter. You'd have to leave the world entirely to do that. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't act as if everything is just fine when a friend who claims to be a Christian is promiscuous or crooked, is flit with God, rude to the friends, gets drunk, becomes greedy, predatory. You can't just go along with this treating like it's acceptable behavior. That's Message translation. Okay? And we've had to run through this before. You have people and you deal with it. You try to deal with it privately. Most time, people don't never know nothing. We deal with it privately. Now, if it depended on the attitude of the people, depends on whether we go into the next level or not. If I come to you and say, this particular behavior is inappropriate, you shouldn't do this, and you tell me, I'm grown, I put my pants on just like you do, you can get the blank out of my life. Y'all laughing, but church folks do that too. Church folks will do that to you. And then you forcing me to now I got to bring somebody else in on it. That's what the scripture says. Scripture says they mess up, you go to them privately, don't hear you, you bring in somebody else. Then they don't hear you, then you deal with it as a church. None of y'all going to get there because y'all ain't going to mess up like that. You ain't got to worry about y'all because you ain't going to go that far. Because when I come to you or my wife or my elders or somebody comes to you, you're going to say, yes, Lord. And if you want to cuss, you're going to wait till you get outside. Hey, I've been corrected. You're not the only one. And I felt like picking them up and throwing them out the window. But I knew they was right. And I knew I was wrong. So you just had to suck it up, take your medicine, and go on about your business. Amen. I didn't like my mama giving me black draw and stuff when I was growing up either. Castor oil and all that kind of stuff. She'd line them up. All y'all line up. We're going to make sure you don't get no colds this winter. Any of y'all know about that kind of stuff? I didn't like it, but you just had to take your medicine and go on. I've had to do it. You're going to have to do it. It goes on to say, I'm not responsible for what the outsiders do, talking about the people in the world. But don't we have some responsibility for those who are within our community of believers? You know, because folks take enough scripture to be dangerous. They judge not. That's the scripture they pull out fast. Judge not, that you be not judged. It didn't never say that the saints weren't supposed to judge. It just used it in, you got to take it in context. In fact, Corinthians is full of judgment starts at the house. It says the saints are going to judge the angels. It says the saints are going to judge the world. And it says you need to be able to judge within your own house. Say amen. God decides on the outsiders, but we need to decide when our brothers and our sisters are out of line, and if necessary, we had to clean house. Now, I know every time people hear preaching, it's like one side of their brain hears the preaching, and the other side of their brain don't hear it. So knowing that, after all these years of preaching, let me back up and say this. Don't hear this one way. What I just said is not a license for you to say anything you want to, anywhere and whenever you want to. Galatians 6:1, New Century Version says, brothers and sisters, if somebody in your group does something wrong, you who are spiritual should go to that person and gently help them make it right again. Be careful, because you might be tempted to sin yourself. So did I play both sides that time? Did y'all hear both sides? Yes, when it's necessary to speak the truth, you speak the truth in love, because you want that person restored. You don't want them embarrassed. You don't want them lost. Okay? But just because you see something don't mean you're supposed to go say it. Lord, if I said everything I saw, I wouldn't have no church here. I've been to run all y'all off. See, when the Lord shows you something, first thing you're supposed to do is what? Because it may not be your job to speak to that person. Because everybody, y'all know this, everybody can't hear correction from everybody. Sometimes it takes a specific person for you to hear them without getting offended. So give the Lord a chance to do what he wants to do. The question I want to ask you this morning is, can you tell your friend the truth even when it's painful? Proverbs 27:6. I hope you're writing these down. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. New Living Translation said, wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. Mike Murdoch says, never complain about what you permit. You all fussing and stuff, and you the one letting it happen. You cannot correct what you're unwilling to confront. And here's one I especially like. Whatever you put up with, you own. So if your child bucks up at you and you let it happen, that's on you. And when children get to be teenagers, they do try they try their wings a couple times. And if you don't learn how to clip them early, you don't have to learn. You can see them when they start clipping. I remember growing up in my daddy's house, and of course he's gone. Y'all have heard the story 100 times. And I know he's coming back on Friday, but I don't know. I just went temporarily insane that day or something. Mama said, your daddy's coming on Friday. And he said, you got to have that grass cut. And I said, well, Daddy ain't here now. I don't know. I lost it for a second. And so Mama started coming at me with her claws. Now, I would never slap my mama, but I was just trying to protect myself. So I did like that. So Mama left it alone. Daddy beat me for the old and the new. Yes, sir. He came home. He said, I'm going to beat you for several things. I'm going to beat you for swinging. I'm going to beat you for your smart mouth. Anyway, that's the reason I got a flat behind, y'all. What does it take to cultivate community? It takes honesty. Everybody say honesty. Number 2, it takes humility. Proverbs 16:18 said, pride goes before destruction, haughty spirit before a fall. You're never going to be able to create community if you think you all that in a bag of chips. Proverbs 29:23 says, a man's pride will bring him low. Remember Nebuchadnezzar? He stood on top of the rooftop looking at all the kingdoms. He said, oh, look at all this stuff I built. I did this. And the Bible said while he was still talking, he went crazy as a Betsy bug. Crawling around like an animal. Grew bird feathers. I don't know how you do that, but, hey. Read it. It's in the book of Daniel. And at the end of 7 years, he went through this for 7 years. Pride will mess you up for a long time. So for 7 years, he's crazy. At the end of 7 years, according to chapter 4, verse 37, says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth and his ways judgment, and those who walk in pride, he is able to abase. I guess he knows, didn't he? In other words, basically, Chuck Thomas' translation is that, Lord, I'm so sorry I opened my stupid mouth and said I did all this. You did it. This church right here, I didn't do this by myself. In a way, I could do this by myself. I didn't do this. I might be the leader of the house, but still, I didn't do this. He did it. Say amen, somebody. Now, when you start talking about humility, people hear out of one side of their head. So let me say this. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. So I come down and I say, Gwen, you sang so wonderfully this morning. Oh, I didn't do it, The Lord did it. Well, I know that, but he still used your voice to sing. Say amen, somebody. So don't put yourself down. Humility is not putting yourself down. It's just putting God up. Y'all got that? Humility is thinking of others more than yourself. Romans 12:16, New Living Translation says, live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people. Don't think you know it all. Some folks feel like they can't hang out with certain people. They're beneath me. Philippians 2:4, the Living Bible says, don't think about your own affairs all the time. Be interested in others too, and what they're doing. What does it take to cultivate community? What's the first thing? What's the second thing? The third thing is courtesy. What courtesy is respecting each other's differences. Being conscious of other people's feelings. Being patient with people who irritate us. I think I need to say that again. Being patient with people who irritate us. Believe me, in every church, there's at least one difficult person. Usually there's more than one. I said in every church there's at least one. Some of them have deep insecurities. Some of them have special emotional needs. Some have irritating mannerisms. Some have poor social skills. Somebody called these people one day EGR persons, extra grace required. I call them high maintenance, low output. They're really needy. They always want to do. You're always fussing, all this kind of stuff, but they don't really help. That's high maintenance, low output. Now I can deal with high maintenance as long as they got high output. I can deal with criticism as long as you helping me. But if you just sitting back looking at everything that everybody does wrong and pointing stuff out, I can't deal with that. I can even deal with low maintenance as long as it's low output. You don't need nothing, but you ain't doing nothing. That's okay. At least you ain't caused me no problem. Here's a strange statement, but you might want to write this down. God puts these people in your life both for their benefit and yours. These people are important for growth, and they are a test of our fellowship. In a natural thing, think about your own family. You always got at least one whose elevator don't go all the way to the top. Come on, every family. Every family got somebody that's not quite as nice and beautiful as everybody else. Maybe a little bit goofy. But the truth is, we're still family. I mean, I had an uncle, man. My Uncle Ray. I can call his name. He gone. Uncle Ray stayed drunk 85% of the time. But he taught me everything I know about jazz. I used to go sit back there with him and just watch him drink and listen to his jazz. He taught me everything I know about jazz. But you couldn't count on Uncle Ray to do nothing else but drink. He drank so much, and he lived with Mama till the day he died. So, well, not quite till the day he died, but close. He did move by himself for a minute, but he lived with my grandmother. He lived with his mama for a long time. And grandmama had him a special refrigerator. You know, everybody else used this refrigerator. Uncle Ray had his special refrigerator. Ain't nothing in there but 100 proof. I love my Uncle Ray, man. He taught me everything I know about jazz, man. And he gave me his stereo when he died. He gave it to me. In his collection, his jazz collection. He gave it to me. Romans 12:10 says, love each other like the members of your family. Be the best at showing honor to one another. The truth is, everybody in this room got some quirks. Everybody in this room got some annoying traits. In the words of my granddaughter, she's not in here, but sometimes we all can act extra. That's Summer's phrase. You acting extra. So how can we be more courteous? First of all, understand where people are coming from. Their history, what they've been through. before you start criticizing, find out their story. Don't downplay their doubts and their fears that they're experiencing right now. Just because you don't fear that doesn't mean it's not doesn't mean it's an invalid feeling. It's real to them right now. Real community happens when people know it's safe enough to share their doubts and fears without being jumped on. What Gwen and I did with our group in the beginning, our core group, I called it our core group. I developed leadership with them. I spent time with them. We poured into each other. We allowed each other to speak into each other's lives. That's how we created the core of leaders that we have at this church right now. I spent at least 7 years developing leaders. Who's going to help with this vision? And we said sometimes we said some tough stuff to each other. Like I said, I wanted to fight 2 or 3 times. He said some things to me I didn't want to hear. But I knew it was right. Say amen. What does it take to cultivate community? Takes what? Takes what? Takes what? All right, y'all a good class. Number 4, it takes confidentiality. Proverbs 11:13 says, a talebearer reveals secrets, but he or she that's of a faithful spirit conceals the matter. Contemporary English Bible says, a slanderer walks around revealing secrets, but a trustworthy person keeps the confidence. Message translation said, a gadabout gossip can't be trusted with a secret. But someone of integrity won't violate a confidence. Can somebody come to you and share their heart with you without you getting on the phone? I'm convinced that God doesn't show us more because we can't keep our mouth shut. He'd show you more if you could do the right thing with it. Proverbs 18:8 says the words of a talebearer or a gossip are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. Message translation said, listening to gossip is like eating cheap candy. You really want that junk in your belly? Proverbs 20:19, a gossip goes around telling secrets. New Living Translation. So don't hang around with people who talk too much. Fire goes out without wood. I like this verse. And quarrels disappear when gossip starts. You know, a lot of people say, well, we don't want to keep it down. We'll stop talking about it. Because every time you put a log on there, it burns more. If you want something to die down, get the wood out the. When I was a Boy Scout, so when they told you that when we get ready to move camp, in order to kill the fire, you don't just put wood on the fire. You move the wood first and pour the wood on the coals. Because as long as that wood, the opportunity for that wood to catch again, pour the water on the coals. Because the coals are going to make the wood catch on fire. Fire goes out without wood, but quarrels disappear when gossip stops. Just don't talk about it. A quarrelsome person starts a fight as easily as hot embers light charcoal or fire lights wood, just like I just got through saying. Proverbs 26:20, where there is no wood, the fire goes out. Where there is no talebearer, the strife cease. Proverbs. Say amen. Where there's no wood, the fire goes out. So if you stop talking about stuff, child, have you heard such and such? We ain't going to talk about that. What they say, if you bring a bone, you'll carry a bone. That's pretty good right there. I should have wrote that in my notes. That's a good one. And here's what they do. They get really spiritual on you. They say, well, I'm not gossiping anything, but I'm concerned. And I got this on reliable information. I got this from a very reliable source. And ain't nobody told you got to say anything. What does it take to cultivate community? It takes honesty. What? Last one. Takes frequency. Now, not frequency in the sense of decibels, but frequency in the sense of time. Small groups like women's groups, men's groups, youth groups, couples groups help churches grow. Small groups help churches grow. Now, a lot of people belong to the corporate church, but they don't get busy in a small group. And small groups is where people feel less threatened. If I was trying to get you to share something about your life, you would not likely do it in a group like this. But if we had a small group, you might be willing to share some of the things you're hurting about. So small groups actually help churches grow. But they have to have frequent, regular contact with people in the group in order to build fellowship. You can't build fellowship just meeting on Sunday once a week. Relationships are like wine. It takes time. They said Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are healthy relationships. That's why Hebrews 10:25 says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. That's not just Sunday morning. That's small groups. That's Bible study. I mean, we got several small groups at the church. Be a part of something, a smaller group. As the manner of some are, and exhorting one another, so much more as you see the day approaching. Contemporary English says, don't stop meeting together with other believers. Some people have gotten into this habit. Instead, encourage one another, especially as you see the day drawing near. Acts chapter 2 says they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, breaking of bread and in prayers. They said they continued daily with one accord in the temple, breaking bread from house to house. Say amen. Acts 5:42, it says, and daily in the temple and in every house, they ceased not to teach and preach Jesus Christ. Hebrews 3:13 says, but exhort one another daily, while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So if we want to build community as Victory Tabernacle, if we want to build a close-knit fellowship, what do we got to have? Now, look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, do you got what it takes?